The notification chimed on my phone, a bright, cheerful sound that felt like a personal insult. It was the third one in 10 minutes. I didn't need to look to know it was from the family group chat, a digital cage of emojis and passive aggression named Fam Bam Valkyrie 2026. I was sitting in the passenger seat of my parents' SUV, watching the monotonous blur of pines and highway dividers, my duffel bag at my feet like an obedient pet. My mom was driving, her hands at 10 and 2, a picture of serene control. My dad was shotgun, navigating with a paper map he insisted was more reliable than GPS. In the back, sprawled across the two captains' chairs and most of the third row, were my sister Chloe's kids, Maddie, age 7, and Leo, age 4, their iPads blasting different, clashing tunes of frenetic cartoon music. Chloe herself was in the other car, following behind with her husband, Greg. The caravan to the Lakeview Resort, a place of supposed shared memory and bonding. I was 28, a fully functional adult with a career, an apartment, and a credit score I was weirdly proud of. Yet, here I was, being ferried like a teenager on a school trip. The trip had been my mother's idea, a post-holidays recharge she'd announced last Thanksgiving. "We never get everyone together anymore," she'd said, her voice laced with a guilt that was both potent and familiar. "Your father and I aren't getting any younger. This might be the last one." It was the last one gambit. A classic, and it had worked. I'd cleared my calendar, used precious vacation days, and agreed to the shared cost model where my parents covered the family suite and the rest of us chipped in for meals and activities. The plan, as reiterated for weeks, was simple. Mom, Dad, and I would share a 2-bedroom suite. Chloe, Greg, and the kids would have the connecting room. Togetherness, but with walls. The Lakeview Resort rose out of the landscape like a mirage of forced fun. It was all vaulted wooden ceilings, massive stone fireplaces, and an overwhelming scent of pine-scented disinfectant. The lobby buzzed with other families in various states of travel weariness and frayed excitement. While my dad went to the sprawling front desk to check us in, I lingered by a gigantic aquarium, watching neon fish dart through plastic coral. Maddie and Leo pressed their faces and sticky hands against the glass, shrieking. "They're just so full of life," my mom said, appearing beside me, her eyes soft on her grandchildren. There was a tone in her voice I recognized, a comparative tone. It was the same tone she used when she'd say, "Chloe calls me every day, you know," or "Leo drew me a picture at preschool. He's so thoughtful." I was an accountant. I didn't draw pictures. My calls were weekly, scheduled, and efficient. I didn't produce grandchildren. In the economy of my family, my currency was stability, which, it turned out, was easily mistaken for dispensability. My dad returned, a cluster of key cards in his hand, his forehead creased. "Little hiccup," he said, his voice a low rumble meant to convey minor inconvenience. My mom's serene smile tightened at the corners. "What kind of hiccup, dear?" "Well," he began, shuffling the cards. "The connecting suite we booked? Apparently, there was a plumbing issue in the second bedroom of our unit. A leak from above. They've had to close it for repairs. A flicker of something, annoyance, but also a weird, petty relief, passed through me. So, the plan was already disrupted. Maybe we'd get upgraded. Maybe we'd have to get 2 separate rooms. More space. More quiet. But," my dad continued, holding up a finger, the manager was very apologetic. "They've comped us a significant food and beverage credit, and they've given us a solution." "What's the solution?" I asked. My dad's eyes met mine, then skittered away to land on the kids, who were now chasing each other around a potted fern. The suite Chloe and Greg were supposed to have is fine. 2 queen beds and a pull-out. Perfect for them and the kids. And for us, he paused, a beat too long. "Well, our original suite still has 1 functional bedroom. The master." I blinked. 1 bedroom. For the 3 of us. My mom swooped in, her hand landing on my arm. It was meant to be comforting. It felt like a restraint. "It's just for sleeping, sweetheart. We'll barely be in the room. And your father and I can take the pull-out couch in the living area. You can have the bedroom. It'll be like a little nest for you." The math was bad, and I am good at math. A king bed for me. My 60-something parents on a lumpy pull-out couch. 4-5 nights. This was not a solution. It was an incubator for resentment. The guilt began its low hum in my ears. "Don't be difficult. They're trying." It's a family vacation. That's not ideal, but okay, I said, the words tasting like ash. I guess if you're sure about the couch. Oh, we'll be fine, my mom trilled, her relief palpable. The crisis, in her mind, was averted. We trudged towards the elevators, a luggage-laden procession. The suite was on the 4th floor, room 412. It was nice enough, a large living area with a balcony overlooking a sliver of the lake, a kitchenette, and a door leading to the master bedroom. The bedroom was spacious, with a lavish bathroom. The promised pull-out couch looked like a medieval torture device, disguised in floral upholstery. Chloe, Greg, and the kids burst into their adjoining room with the energy of a bomb squad entering a volatile situation. Suitcases were flung open, toys were already scattering across the floor like shrapnel, and the decibel level immediately tripled. Leo started crying because his favorite stuffy was smushed at the bottom of a bag. I retreated into my assigned bedroom, closed the door, and leaned against it. The relative quiet was a balm. I could still hear the muffled chaos, but it was distant. I unpacked my bag, hanging up my clothes in the closet, placing my toiletries neatly in the bathroom, creating order, staking a claim. This was my nest. For now, the first 2 days followed a predictable rhythm. Breakfast buffets where I spent more time retrieving dropped forks and spilt orange juice for my niece and nephew than eating my own food. Group hikes where the pace was dictated by the shortest legs and most frequent, I'm tired whines. Evenings spent in the suite, the adults squeezed onto various pieces of furniture while the kids ricocheted off the walls, hyped up on resort hot chocolate and the novel lack of rules. My parents, on their terrible pull-out, looked increasingly haggard. Dark circles bloomed under my dad's eyes. My mom developed a persistent twitch in her right cheek, a sure sign of stress she'd had since my teenage years. I offered, more than once, to switch. Really, I can take the couch for a night or two. Give you guys a break. Every time, my mom waved me off. Don't be silly. This is your vacation too. We're managing. But the managing was becoming a tangible, sour presence in the room. Conversations grew clipped. My dad snapped at Chloe when Leo knocked over his glass of wine. Chloe snapped back about understanding the realities of children. Greg stared resolutely at his phone. I felt like a spectator at a slow-motion collision, unable to look away, unable to move. The breaking point came on the morning of the 3rd day. I'd woken early, craving solitude and a proper coffee, not from a giant thermal carafe. I slipped out of the bedroom to find my mom and dad already up, sitting at the small dining table, heads close together, speaking in low, urgent tones. They fell silent when they saw me. Morning, I said, heading for the coffee maker. Sweetheart, come sit, my mom said. Her voice had that particular blend of softness and steel that preceded something unpleasant. I poured my coffee and joined them, the steam from my mug curling between us like a specter. My dad cleared his throat. We've been talking about the sleeping situation. I told you, I'm happy to take the couch tonight, I said preemptively. It's not that, my mom interjected. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was cool and dry. It's about the family dynamic. This trip isn't working the way we hoped. A cold trickle of apprehension started in my chest. What do you mean? The kids, my dad said, his voice weary. They're overstimulated. The room is too small for them to play. Chloe and Greg are exhausted, trying to keep them quiet in the evenings so we can all relax, but it's just not a good environment for them. For anyone. I waited. The but hung in the air, fat and unavoidable. My mom squeezed my hand. We think it would be best for the overall happiness of the vacation if we reconfigured. Reconfigured how? My voice was flat. If Chloe, Greg, and the kids had this suite, my mom said in a rush, as if speed would lessen the blow. The living space is bigger. The kids could spread out their toys. Chloe and Greg could have the bedroom for some privacy. The pullout is bigger than the one in their room, so the kids could sleep out here. It makes more sense. The cold trickle turned into a flood, freezing me from the inside out. I carefully extracted my hand from hers. And where would you and Dad go? We'd stay here too, of course, my dad said. We'd take the bedroom. You heard your mother. It's for the kids' sake. We can handle a few more nights on the couch if it means everyone else is comfortable. The logic was a Mobius strip of selfishness, disguised as sacrifice. They would martyr themselves on the altar of the pull-out couch for the grandkids. Chloe and Greg would get an upgrade. And I? And me? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I needed to hear them say it. My mom's smile was a grimace of pity. Well, honey, that's the thing. There just isn't space. We've crunched the numbers. She actually used that phrase. Crunched the numbers. The resort is fully booked, no other rooms. We thought, you're the most flexible. You have your own life back home, no real attachments here. We thought you could just head back a few days early. We'll cover your gas, of course. And you can have all the peace and quiet you want in your own apartment. She said it like she was offering me a prize. Like she was granting me freedom from the vacation I had cleared my schedule and paid to be on. Like my presence was the superfluous variable in their family equation, the one you could simply remove to solve for happiness. I stared at them. My father couldn't meet my eyes, studying a watermark on the wooden table. My mother's gaze was pleading, willing me to be the understanding one, the easygoing one, the one who didn't make waves. For a moment, the old programming kicked in. The desire to please, to avoid conflict, to be the good child who was low maintenance. It rose in my throat, a familiar bile. Then it evaporated, burned away by a white-hot clarity. They were not asking. They were telling. They had decided my portion of this family vacation was forfeit. My room, my place, my time. All of it was negotiable currency to be spent on Chloe's branch of the family tree. I was being sent home like a misbehaving dog. No real attachments here. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was bitter. Perfect. Okay, I said, my voice remarkably calm. Their relief was instantaneous, a physical slump of their shoulders. Oh, sweetheart, I knew you'd understand, my mom gushed, reaching for my hand again. I moved it to wrap around my mug. I just need to pack, I said, standing up. Of course. Take your time. We'll have a nice goodbye lunch before you go, my dad said, his joviality returning now that the unpleasantness was resolved. I walked back into the bedroom and closed the door. I didn't pack. I sat on the edge of the bed, my phone in my hand. The cold fury had crystallized into a sharp, diamond-hard plan. I opened my browser, not the resort's website, but a luxury travel service I'd used once for a client gift. I searched for the Lakeview Resort. I filtered by suite. And there it was, the Lakeview Penthouse. 3 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a private rooftop terrace with a hot tub, a full chef's kitchen, a dedicated concierge. The price per night was a number that made my eyes water, a number that represented 6 months of my car payment. I didn't hesitate. I booked it. 4-5 nights, starting immediately. I used my own credit card, the one with the excellent score. The confirmation email hit my inbox with a soft ping. I was no longer a guest being sent away. I was a guest upgrading to a stratosphere they didn't even know existed in this resort. I stood up and packed my bag, slowly and meticulously. I didn't just throw things in. I folded, I organized. I was performing a ritual. When I was done, I zipped the duffel closed and wheeled my small suitcase out into the living area. My family was there, assembled. Chloe was trying to coax Leo into his shoes. Greg was on his phone. My parents looked at me with placid, grateful smiles. All set? My mom asked. Just about, I said. I walked to the door, opened it, and wheeled my suitcase out into the hallway. Aren't you forgetting something? My dad chuckled, pointing at my duffel bag still sitting by the couch. I looked back at them, my hand on the doorframe. No, I said. I'm not. I left the door open as I walked down the hall, not towards the elevators that led to the lobby, but towards the bank of elevators at the far end of the corridor, the ones marked Penthouse Suites and Executive Level. I pressed the call button. The door slid open with a hushed, expensive sigh. I stepped in and pressed PH. The ascent was smooth, silent. The penthouse floor had its own private lobby, a small, serene space with orchids and abstract art. My key card, a heavier, black version of the standard ones, unlocked a double oak door. The suite wasn't a room, it was a domain. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic, breathtaking view of the lake and the surrounding mountains. The living room was larger than my entire apartment back home, furnished with modern, elegant pieces that looked both comfortable and untouched. A grand piano sat in one corner. I walked through the archway into the chef's kitchen, all gleaming stainless steel and marble. A welcome basket with a bottle of Dom Perignon and artisanal chocolates sat on the counter. I opened a set of glass doors and stepped onto the rooftop terrace. The air was crisp and clean. The hot tub bubbled invitingly. I could see the entire resort below, the pools like turquoise tiles, the tiny figures of people moving about. I could almost, but not quite, make out the window of room 412. A laugh, sharp and unbidden, escaped my lips. It echoed in the vast, empty space. It was a laugh of disbelief, of triumph, of sheer, unadulterated pettiness. It felt glorious. I spent the afternoon in a state of luxurious shock. I took a long, steaming shower in the primary bathroom's rainfall showerhead. I wrapped myself in the plush, hotel-branded robe. I ordered a ridiculously expensive club sandwich and a glass of champagne from room service, and ate it on the terrace, watching the sun begin its slow descent over the lake. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant cry of a gull and the gentle hum of the hot tub. I felt my shoulders, which had been knotted for days, maybe years, begin to unwind. I knew it couldn't last. I knew they would find out. In a resort, especially within a family, information travels through the vents. I was prepared, or so I thought. The knock came at around 7 p.m. It wasn't the gentle tap of room service. It was a firm, persistent rap. I had been reading a novel on one of the vast sofas, completely engrossed in the fictional world's manageable problems. I set the book down and padded to the door. I didn't look through the peephole. I knew who it was. I opened the door. They stood there, a ragged tableau of bewilderment and dawning fury. My mother, my father, and Chloe. Greg was presumably back in the room with the kids. They were all holding their suitcases. For a long moment, no one spoke. Their eyes were not on me, but on the opulence visible over my shoulder, the soaring ceiling, the wall of windows, the grand piano. Their gazes swept past me, taking in the sheer, impossible scale of the space I occupied. My mother found her voice first. It was a whisper, strained and thin. "What is this?" "This," I said, leaning casually against the doorframe, "is my room." "Your room?" my father spluttered, his face turning a mottled red. "This is the penthouse." "Yes, it is." Chloe's mouth was hanging open. She looked from the suite to my face, her expression cycling through confusion, envy, and outrage. Why did you win this or something?" "I booked it," I said simply. "You booked it?" My mother's whisper escalated to a shriek. "You booked the penthouse? With what money?" "What?" "You told me to go home," I said, my voice still calm, a flat lake against their tempest. I decided I didn't want to. I wanted to stay on vacation. Since there was no space for me in the family plan, I made my own. But this must cost a fortune," my dad boomed, finally tearing his eyes from the interior to glare at me. "This is irresponsible. Extravagant. Who do you think you are?" "I'm the person you told had no real attachments here," I replied. Turns out, my only attachment was to my own self-respect. It was surprisingly affordable once I factored that in. My mom took a step forward, as if to push past me. I didn't move. "This is absurd. You can't stay here alone in this monstrosity. We're your family. We're all crammed into that awful suite. The kids are climbing the walls, and you're up here living like some movie star." Her voice cracked on the last word, a mix of accusation and a strange, desperate longing. "The sleeping situation did seem suboptimal," I said, nodding with mock sympathy. "I'm sorry to hear that." Chloe found her voice, sharp and pointed. "So what? This is your big revenge. You're rubbing our faces in it? We're supposed to be on a family vacation, and you're off by yourself, wasting money just to spite us." I looked at her, my sister. The golden child, the grandchild producer, the center of gravity around which our parents now orbited. I saw the lines of tiredness around her eyes, the frustration in her set jaw. For a fleeting second, I felt a pang of something that wasn't quite pity. Then I remembered her silence when my banishment was announced. Her implicit acceptance of the new configuration that benefited her. "This isn't about you, Chloe," I said. "This is about me. You were all so concerned with reconfiguring for the overall happiness. You found a solution that worked for everyone. This," I gestured behind me, "is mine." My father, ever the pragmatist, tried a new tack. His anger subsided, replaced by a wheedling, reasonable tone. "Look, this is silly. Clearly, there's been a misunderstanding. A little family spat. But this is an outrageous waste. Why don't we just fix this? You cancel this place. Surely they have a cancellation policy, and you come back down with us. We'll figure something out." Maybe you can share the bedroom with Maddie and Leo can be on a cot with us? Or, he was already reconfiguring again. My space, my sanctuary, was just another variable in his spreadsheet of familial logistics. The penthouse was an anomaly to be corrected. No, I said. The word was quiet, but final. It hung in the plush hallway air like a stone. What do you mean, no? My mother gasped. I mean, no. I'm not canceling. I'm not coming back down. I'm staying here. This is my vacation now. Chloe scoffed. So that's it. You're just going to shut us out? You're going to sit up here in your ivory tower while your family struggles down there. You didn't seem overly concerned about my struggle when you were accepting the keys to my room, I pointed out. My mother's eyes filled with tears. The nuclear option. How can you be so cruel? After everything we've done for you? We raised you. We paid for your education. Is this how you repay us? By flaunting your money and your selfishness. The guilt trip. Old, reliable, and for the first time in my life, completely impotent. I felt its hooks try to catch in my skin, but they slid right off the new, hardened armor I seemed to have grown in the last few hours. You asked me to leave, I repeated, slowly and clearly, as if they were the ones not understanding. I chose to stay, in different accommodations. The two things are not connected. My decision to book this suite is not an act of cruelty. It's an act of self-preservation. You made it abundantly clear that my comfort was the lowest priority on this trip. So I simply reprioritized. A heavy silence descended. They just stood there, suitcases at their feet, looking at me as if I were a stranger who had stolen their daughter's face. The reality was dawning on them, and it wasn't pretty. They couldn't command me. They couldn't guilt me. They couldn't logic me out of this. The power dynamic, so long entrenched, had utterly inverted. My father's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a look of profound confusion. So what are we supposed to do now? That was the question, wasn't it? They had shown up, suitcases in hand, with some unspoken expectation. That I would cave, that I would be shamed, that I would see the error of my ways and welcome them into the luxury, letting them reconfigure my penthouse as they saw fit. They had no plan B. I suppose, I said, you go back to your suite. The one you chose. You have your reconfigured family vacation. And I have mine. Alone? My mother whispered, the tragedy of it all nearly choking her. I smiled, a small, genuine smile. It's remarkably peaceful. I began to close the door. My mother's hand shot out, not to stop it, but a last, feeble gesture. Wait, at least can we see it? Just a quick look. For a moment, I considered it. To let them in, to watch their envy and awe bloom fully, to let them taste the world they'd excluded me from. But that would be letting them in, literally and figuratively. That would be sharing. That would be folding my victory back into the family drama. No, I said softly. This isn't a family space. Good night. I closed the door. The solid, heavy thud of the oak meeting its frame was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I engaged the deadbolt, the chain, and the electronic privacy lock. Then I stood there, my back against the door, listening. I heard muffled voices, angry, plaintive, confused. I heard the sound of suitcase wheels turning reluctantly on the carpet. I heard the distant ding of the elevator arriving and then departing. Then, silence. I remained against the door for a long time, my breath slowly evening out. The confrontation had been bracing, like diving into icy water. Now, in the aftermath, I felt a strange, hollow tremble in my limbs. Was it adrenaline crash? Regret? I walked to the wall of windows, looking down at the glittering resort. Somewhere in that honeycomb of light was room 412, a pressure cooker of resentment I had just escaped. I thought of my mother's tears, my father's confusion. A part of me, the part that had been conditioned for 28 years, screamed that I was a monster, that I had broken something irreparable. But a newer, quieter voice asked, what exactly did you break? The illusion that you would always bend? The expectation that your needs were negotiable? I turned away from the window. The penthouse stretched around me, silent and magnificent. It didn't judge. It merely existed, a testament to the principle of exchange, money for space, a choice for peace. I had made my exchange. To quiet the warring voices in my head, I decided to explore my domain thoroughly. I had only seen the main living area, kitchen, and terrace. Now, I walked down a softly lit hallway. The first door opened into a bedroom almost as large as the master in the suite downstairs, with its own ensuite bathroom and a private balcony. The second bedroom was slightly smaller, but just as opulent. The third was configured as a study, with a massive oak desk, a leather executive chair, and shelves of hardcover books that looked real, not decorative. There was a powder room off the main hall, and finally, the primary bedroom suite. It was a sanctuary within a sanctuary. A California king bed on a raised platform, dressed in impossibly high thread count linens. A sitting area with a gas fireplace. A walk-in closet larger than my first studio apartment's kitchen. The bathroom was a marble-clad fantasy. A freestanding soaking tub overlooking the mountains, a separate steam shower for four, his and hers vanities, and a discreet water closet. I ran a bath, pouring in the provided lavender salts. As I sank into the hot, fragrant water, the last of the tension melted from my muscles. I watched the stars emerge over the black silhouette of the mountains. This was not just a room. It was an experience, and it was mine. Meanwhile, the reality in room 412 was curdling. After the stunned retreat from the penthouse floor, my family rode the elevator down in a thick, hostile silence. The doors opened on the fourth floor, and they shuffled back to their room, the wheels of their suitcases now sounding like a defeated army dragging its gear. Greg looked up from his phone as they entered. Well, is she coming down? What's the deal? Chloe threw her purse onto the couch, which was currently a bed, its sheets tangled and pillows on the floor. The deal is that our sister has completely lost her mind. She's booked the penthouse, the actual penthouse suite, and she won't let us in. Greg's eyebrows shot up. The penthouse. How? What? To spite us, obviously. Chloe snapped, collapsing into an armchair. She's up there living like a queen while we're packed in here like sardines. My mother sank onto the edge of the pull-out, her face in her hands. She wouldn't even let us see it. She just closed the door. Her voice was muffled, thick with tears. My dad paced the small space, his footsteps heavy. It's unconscionable. The waste. The sheer defiance of it. He stopped and looked at the chaos around him. Toys everywhere. A half-eaten bowl of cereal on the coffee table. Maddie's crayon drawings taped haphazardly to the wall. And for what? To prove a point. What point? Greg asked, genuinely perplexed. That she has more money than sense? That we hurt her, my mother said, lifting her head. Her mascara was smudged. That's the point. We told her to go home, and she upgraded. We didn't tell her. We asked her, my dad corrected, but his voice lacked conviction. Did we? Chloe asked quietly, staring at the wall that separated the living room from the bedroom where her children were supposedly sleeping. It didn't feel like a request when we presented it. It felt like a decree. This is what's happening for the overall happiness. She parroted my mother's phrase with a bitter twist. My mother flinched. It was for the overall happiness. Look at the kids. They need space. At that moment, as if on cue, Leo started wailing from the bedroom. A full-throated, overtired scream. Maddie's voice followed. Whining, Leo kicked me. Chloe didn't move. She just closed her eyes. Greg sighed, a long, exhausted sound, and pushed himself off the couch to go mediate. The reconfigured paradise was revealing its flaws. The kids, far from being soothed by more space, were territorial and confused by the new sleeping arrangements. The argument over who got which couch cushion had been a 30-minute ordeal. The bedroom, which was supposed to be a retreat for Chloe and Greg, felt less like a sanctuary and more like a guilty secret, as my parents' presence on the living room pull-out was a constant, silent rebuke. The food and beverage credit was dwindling rapidly, spent on overpriced room service meals because no one had the energy to rally for a restaurant. My parents, on the pull-out, were miserable. The mattress was thin, the bar in the middle a persistent spine crusher. Every sigh, every creak of the springs, was an audible testament to their discomfort. The glow of their supposed sacrifice had worn off, replaced by the gritty reality of a bad night's sleep and the glaring injustice of their daughter living in palatial splendor 10 floors above. The next day, the vacation split into two parallel, non-intersecting tracks. I woke naturally at 8:30 a.m. to sunlight streaming across my bed. I ordered breakfast, fresh squeezed orange juice, a French press of single-origin coffee, eggs Benedict with smoked salmon, and a basket of pastries. I ate on the terrace, wrapped in a blanket against the morning chill, planning my day of glorious nothing. I called the concierge, a polite and efficient man named Robert. Robert, I'd like to book a private yoga session on the lakeside deck for 1 at 11 a.m. and a deep tissue massage in the spa for 3 p.m. The longest you have. Of course, madam. I will arrange it. Would you prefer the session to be hatha or vinyas flow? Surprise me, I said, feeling decadent. Later, as I walked through the lobby in my yoga attire, a light mat under my arm, I saw them. They were huddled near the fireplace again, looking like survivors of a shipwreck. My dad was trying to read a newspaper while Maddie tugged on his sleeve asking for pool toys. My mom was jiggling a fussy Leo on her hip. Chloe and Greg were having a tense, whispered argument by the front desk, probably about checkout times or additional charges. I didn't alter my course. I walked straight towards the doors leading to the lake path. My mother saw me first. Her eyes widened, then filled with a complex mix of hope and hurt. She opened her mouth, but I gave a small, polite, distant smile, the kind you'd give a vague acquaintance, and kept walking. I felt their collective gaze on my back like a physical weight until I turned the corner. The yoga session was transformative. On a private deck overlooking the glassy lake, with only the sound of lapping water and the instructor's soothing voice, I stretched and breathed. For an hour, I didn't think about family or penthouses or betrayal. I was just a body in space, breathing in pine and cold water air. The instructor, a serene woman named Anya, said at the end, "You carry much tension in your shoulders and jaw, but your breath is strong. You are finding your center." I almost laughed. My center felt like a newly discovered country. Back in the penthouse, I showered and changed. My phone buzzed with texts. "Mom, 10:47 a.m. we saw you. You couldn't even say hello?" "Dad, 10:49 a.m. This is getting ridiculous. We are having a family meeting at lunch. The restaurant by the pool. 1 p.m. Be there." "Chloe, 10:52 a.m. You're humiliating them. Just stop." I didn't reply. I muted the chat. I had a massage booked. The spa was a temple of hushed tones and essential oils. My massage was in a secluded suite with its own fireplace and soundscape of forest murmurs. The therapist worked out knots I didn't know I had, knots that felt decades old. As the pressure eased the chronic tightness between my shoulder blades, I had a sudden, vivid memory. I was 12, crying in my room because Chloe, then 14, had taken my favorite sweater without asking and stained it. My mom had come in, not to comfort me, but to say, "Be the bigger person, honey. It's just a sweater." She didn't mean to. I had stifled my tears, swallowed my injustice. Be the bigger person. It had been the mantra of my childhood. The bigger person gives up the sweater. The bigger person takes the smaller piece of cake. The bigger person doesn't complain about the pull-out couch. The bigger person goes home quietly. On the massage table, a tear slipped from the corner of my eye and was absorbed by the padded face cradle. I wasn't being the bigger person anymore. I was being a person, full-sized, taking up space. I emerged from the spa feeling fluid and renewed. It was past 1 p.m. The family meeting would be in shambles. I felt a twinge, not of guilt, but of curiosity. What were they saying? What was their new theory about my behavior? Were they still casting me as the villain, or was the narrative starting to crack? I decided to test the waters. I went to the resort's upscale bistro, the one with white tablecloths and a wine list longer than the menu. I asked for a table for one by the window. As I perused the menu, I saw them. They were at a large, messy table near the pool patio, the remains of their lunch scattered about. The kids were fidgeting, my parents looked drained, Chloe and Greg were silent. My dad was gesturing, holding forth on something, his face animated with frustration. My mother's gaze was wandering, and it landed on me. She froze. She nudged my father. He stopped talking and turned. One by one, they all looked over. It was like a slow pan shot in a movie. The disheveled, unhappy family staring across the restaurant at the solitary, serene sister/daughter, sitting in the calm eye of the hurricane she had ostensibly created. I didn't look away. I met my mother's eyes, held them for a moment, then gave a small, neutral nod. I turned my attention back to my menu. When I glanced up a minute later, they were all turned back to their table, but the energy had shifted. The wind had gone out of my dad's sails. They ate the rest of their meal in near silence. My lunch arrived, a seared scallop salad, a glass of crisp Sauvignon Blanc. It was exquisite. Every bite was a choice. Every sip was peace. The afternoon I spent on my terrace, reading. As dusk approached, I wrapped myself in a blanket and watched the lights of the resort twinkle on below. The hot tub bubbled invitingly. I slipped into it, the hot water enveloping me, steam rising into the cold night air. I looked up at the vast, star-dusted sky. The feeling of isolation was complete, but it no longer felt like loneliness. It felt like sovereignty. Down in 412, the evening was descending into farce. The reconfigured sleeping arrangement had led to a mutiny. Leo, terrified of the strange pull-out couch in the dark living room, had refused to sleep there, ending up in the bedroom with Chloe and Greg, which meant Maddie had to be moved to the living room, which meant she was now scared and crying. My parents, trapped on the pull-out with a weeping granddaughter, were at their absolute limit. "This isn't working," my dad finally growled, his voice strained. "None of this is working." "What do you want me to do, Dad?" Chloe shot back, her own patience gone. "He's 4. He's scared. We're all scared," my mom cried, her voice breaking. "I'm scared I've lost my daughter. I'm scared we've broken something." It was the first time she'd voiced the deeper fear, the one that lurked beneath the anger about waste and defiance. The room went quiet, save for Maddie's sniffles. "She's not lost," Greg said quietly, practicality cutting through the emotion. "She's 10 floors up. She made a choice. A nuclear one, but a choice. We made one too. Ours just sucks." It was a brutal, simple assessment. No one could argue. "I'm going to talk to her," my mother said suddenly, standing up. "Alone. No suitcases. No demands. I'm just going to talk." No one objected. They were out of ideas. Up in the penthouse, I was watching an old movie on the giant flat screen, a bowl of gourmet popcorn in my lap, when a different kind of knock sounded. Softer. Hesitant. I paused the movie. I knew who it was. This time, I looked through the peephole. My mother stood there alone, wringing her hands. She looked small, older than her years. I took a deep breath. This was different. A lone diplomat, not a mob with luggage. I opened the door, but left the chain engaged, creating a narrow gap. We looked at each other through the gap. "Hi," she said, her voice hoarse. "Hi. Can I come in? Just for a minute?" I thought about it. The chain felt symbolic. "Why?" She swallowed. "To apologize. Not for everything. Not yet. But for how we did it. For telling you. Not asking you. That was wrong. It was a start. A tiny, fragile start." I closed the door, slid the chain off, and opened it fully, stepping back to let her in. She stepped over the threshold and stopped, her eyes doing the same panoramic sweep the others had done, but her reaction was different. There was no fury, no envy. Just a deep, sad awe. "Oh my," she whispered. "It's beautiful." "It is," I agreed. She walked slowly into the living room, not touching anything, just taking it in. She saw the movie paused, the popcorn bowl, the blanket draped over the sofa. She saw the evidence of a solitary, contented life in progress. "You look rested," she said. "I am." She turned to face me, her eyes shiny. "We're not. It's a disaster downstairs. The kids are a mess. Your father and I, we can't sleep. Chloe and Greg are fighting." She wrapped her arms around herself. "You were right. Our solution, it solved nothing. It just made everyone miserable in a different configuration. I didn't say I told you so. I just waited. When we asked you to leave," she began, then corrected herself. "When we told you to leave, we weren't thinking of you as a person with your own stake in this. We saw you as adjustable. The child who never caused trouble. The easy one." A tear spilled over. "We took you for granted. We traded your comfort for a hypothetical peace that didn't exist. I am so sorry for that." The words hung in the air. They were the right words. Or, the beginning of the right words. They didn't erase the hurt, but they acknowledged its source. "Thank you for saying that," I said, my own throat tight. "Can you forgive us?" The question was a plea. "I don't know," I answered honestly. Forgiveness isn't a toggle switch. It's a process, and it requires change. Not just words now, but actions later. It requires you to see me differently, not as the flexible one, but as someone with an equal claim to space, to consideration. She nodded, wiping her cheeks. "I am seeing you differently. Right now, standing here in this castle you built for yourself. I see a strength I didn't know you had. It's intimidating." It wasn't strength at first, I admitted. It was rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. Then it became a choice. A very expensive choice, she said, with a faint, watery smile. The most expensive thing, I said, was the cost of always being the one who folded. This is an investment. She understood. I could see it in her eyes. The penny dropped, not just about this trip, but about a lifetime of small concessions that had built a wall of resentment. Will you come down? Have breakfast with us tomorrow? The last morning, she asked, hope tentative in her voice. I considered. The thought of re-entering that chaotic atmosphere made my skin prickle. But her coming here, alone, apologizing, it was a gesture. One I could meet partway. I'll meet you in the main dining room for breakfast at 9, I said. Not in the suite. It was a boundary. A public, neutral space. She nodded, accepting the terms. Okay, 9 o'clock. We'd like that. She didn't ask to stay. She didn't ask for a tour. She just turned and walked back to the door. Good night, sweetheart, she said, her voice softer than it had been in days. Good night, Mom. After she left, the penthouse felt different. Not invaded, but witnessed. My defiant act had been seen not just as defiance, but as what it was, a statement of self. It changed the energy. The final morning, I packed my things carefully. I took one last, long look at the view from the terrace, committing it to memory. I descended in the private elevator for the last time at 8:55. They were already seated at a large round table in the sun-drenched dining room when I arrived. They looked tired but combed, a united front trying to project normalcy. There was an empty chair between my dad and Maddie. I took it. The meal was stilted but civil. Maddie chattered about the pool. Leo was quietly focused on a pile of pancakes. My parents made strained small talk about the drive home. Chloe asked me, once, if I'd slept well. Very well, thank you, I said. After the plates were cleared, my dad cleared his throat. We've been talking about the costs. For the meals, the activities we did together. We'll Venmo you your share of what we used from the group fund. And we'll cover your gas, as we said, my mom added. That's fine, I said. It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. They were adhering to the original agreement, as if trying to reset something. We all stood up. The moment of departure had arrived. In the lobby, surrounded by luggage, the awkwardness returned. What was the proper goodbye? A hug that felt false. A handshake that was absurd? My mother stepped forward first. She didn't hug me. She put her hands on my shoulders and looked me in the eye. Drive safely. Call me when you're home, so I know you're safe. It was a normal motherly instruction. It felt like a peace offering. I will, I said. She pulled me into a quick, tight hug. It was brief, but it was real. My dad gave me an awkward pat on the back. Take care. Chloe just nodded at me, a complicated look in her eyes. Bye. Bye, Chloe. I got into my car alone. As I pulled out of the resort, the grand building shrinking in my rearview mirror, I didn't feel the hollow ache of estrangement I'd feared, nor the giddy high of victory. I felt a solid, quiet exhaustion, the kind that comes after a long and necessary battle. The penthouse had been a symbol, a glorious, over-the-top fortress. But the real victory wasn't the suite. It was the unshakable knowledge I carried with me now, as I drove towards my own home, my own life. I had finally learned to close the door, and I had the only key. The silence in the car was no longer lonely. It was mine. It was the sound of a new equation, one where I was no longer the variable to be solved for, but a constant in my own right. The drive home was a 5-hour meditation. The adrenaline of the confrontation and the surreal luxury had worn off, leaving behind a raw, quiet space for reflection. I replayed the scenes in my head. The cold coffee in room 412, the click of the penthouse door closing, my mother's tearful face in the gap of the chain lock. Each memory was a stone, and I turned them over in my mind, examining their weight and texture. About halfway home, my phone buzzed with a Venmo notification. It was from my dad. The amount was exactly my share of the estimated group expenses, plus $50 with a note, for gas. Dad. I stared at the notification. It was transactional, clean, a settling of accounts. It felt like a line being drawn under the vacation, but also, strangely, like an acknowledgement. They were paying what they owed. Not just the money, but the gesture of adhering to the original deal. It was a small, concrete step in the new, unfamiliar territory of treating me like an adult whose contributions and costs were quantifiable. I didn't reply. I just let the notification sit there, a digital artifact of the shift. When I finally unlocked the door to my apartment, the familiar scent of home, lavender cleaner, and the faint hint of coffee from that morning a lifetime ago washed over me. It was small, quiet, and entirely mine. I dropped my bags in the doorway and just stood there for a moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The contrast with the penthouse's vast silence was stark. This wasn't majestic solitude. This was everyday solitude. And it felt just as good, because it was chosen, not assigned. I unpacked, the ritual now bookending the whole experience. As I put my toiletries back in their place, my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. I needed more space, more time in my own bubble. The message chimed a minute later. "Hi, honey. It's Mom. Just calling to make sure you got home okay. We're back too. It was a long drive. Anyway, give me a call when you feel up to it. No pressure. Love you." Her voice was tired, but the edge was gone. The pleading, the guilt tripping, the accusation, they were absent. It was just a check-in. It felt normal, or the beginning of a new normal. I didn't call back that night. I ordered Thai food, took a long bath in my ordinary, non-marble tub, and went to bed early in my own bed, which suddenly felt like the most luxurious thing in the world. The week that followed was a slow return to routine, but I was different. I went to work, I ran errands, I saw friends. But internally, I was recalibrating. The family group chat was silent. The Fam Bam Vakui 2026 thread was a ghost town, a digital monument to the disaster. Then, on Thursday evening, a new message popped up from my mom. It wasn't in the group chat. It was a direct text. "Mom, would you be free for a phone call this weekend? Your father and I would like to talk." Not a demand, a request. I wrote back. "Me, sure. Sunday evening works." "Mom, okay. We'll call then." The conversation, when it happened, was 3 hours long. We didn't talk about the penthouse, not directly. We talked about the vacation. My parents, together on speakerphone, described their perspective, the stress of the original plumbing issue, their genuine fear that the kids were suffering, their blind belief that I, the unattached one, would understand. They didn't excuse it, they explained it. And in their explanation, I heard their own flawed logic, their own desperation for a happy family tableau, their own blind spot where I was concerned. I told them my perspective, the slow burn resentment of the sleeping arrangements, the chilling finality of being told to leave, the feeling of being erased from the family picture for the sake of convenience. I told them about the rage and the clarity that followed. "We never saw you as unattached," my dad said, his voice gruff with emotion. "We saw you as capable, too capable. We thought you could handle it." It was a terrible thing to think. It was, I agreed. We talked about childhood patterns, about the dynamic between me and Chloe. My mom admitted, her voice small, that she often leaned on Chloe because Chloe needed more help, more validation, more hands-on parenting, and that in doing so, she had accidentally made my independence seem like a lack of need. "I need things too, Mom," I said, my voice cracking for the first time. "I need to be considered. I need to be chosen, sometimes. Not just expected to understand." There were tears on both ends of the line. It was messy, painful, and profoundly necessary. We didn't resolve everything. How could we? 28 years of patterns don't unravel in one phone call. But we pulled on a thread. We named the problem. And in naming it, we began to change its power. We ended the call with a plan, a low-pressure family dinner at my parents' house in a month. No kids for the first hour, so the adults could talk. A negotiated peace, not a forced reunion. In the weeks that followed, the change was subtle but real. My mom called me sometimes just to chat, not to guilt me about not calling. She asked about my work, my friends, my plans, with genuine interest, not as a preamble to asking for something or comparing me to Chloe. My dad sent me a funny article about accounting with the note, "Thought of you." It was a small thing, but it meant he saw me, my profession, my identity. Chloe was slower to come around. Our relationship had a deeper layer of complication, tangled in childhood rivalries and the new hierarchy of grandchildren. We exchanged a few bland, polite texts. The wound there was wider, and healing would take its own time, if it happened at all. I was learning to be okay with that. Not every relationship has to be close to be valid. Sometimes, cordial distance is the healthiest configuration. A month later, I drove to my parents' house for the dinner. I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach as I pulled into the driveway. The familiar house looked the same, but I was different. I walked in, and the smell of my mom's pot roast hit me, a smell of childhood, of supposed security. It was disorienting, but the greeting was different. My mom hugged me, but it wasn't crushing or overbearing. It was just a hug. My dad clapped me on the shoulder. Glad you're here. They had set the table in the dining room, not the kitchen nook. It felt formal, deliberate. Chloe and Greg arrived shortly after, without the kids, who were with a sitter. The first hour was stiff. We made small talk about work, the weather. Then, over dinner, my dad, surprising everyone, brought it up. I've been thinking about that vacation a lot, he said, pushing his peas around his plate. About the reconfiguration. He said the word with air quotes, a hint of self-mockery. I've been applying it to things at work. And it's a terrible strategy. You don't solve a problem by offloading it onto the most compliant team member. You collaborate on a new solution. I'm sorry we didn't collaborate with you. It was an apology couched in his language, the language of management and logistics. It was perfectly him, and it was utterly sincere. Thank you, Dad, I said. Chloe looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry too, she said, not meeting my eyes. For just going along with it. I was tired, and I saw a solution that gave me and Greg a bedroom, and I took it without thinking about what it cost you. That was selfish. It was more than I expected from her. I appreciate you saying that, Chloe. The conversation didn't magically fix us, but it cleared the air. We finished the meal talking about safer topics, but the tension was gone. When Chloe and Greg left to relieve the sitter, my mom walked me to the door. This was good, she said, handing me my coat. This feels honest. It does, I agreed. She kissed my cheek. I love you. Not because you're easy, just because you're you. That night, driving back to my apartment, I realized the most expensive room wasn't the penthouse. It was the emotional space I had finally claimed within my own family. A space with boundaries, with acknowledged needs, with a door I controlled. The penthouse had been the catalyst, the physical manifestation of my no. But the real work, the real redemption, was happening here, in the quiet, difficult conversations, in the changed patterns, in the hard-won respect. My life didn't become perfect. There were still moments of friction, times when the old patterns tried to reassert themselves. But now I had a reference point. I had felt what it was like to be sovereign in my own life. I had the memory of that silent terrace, the closed oak door, the taste of champagne earned not through celebration, but through self-respect. Whenever I felt the old pressure to fold, to be the bigger person at my own expense, I remembered the view from the penthouse. Not of the lake, but of the tiny world below, where I had once been a pawn in someone else's game. I was no longer on that board. I had redrawn the map, and I was finally home.